The Galactic Peace Summit was held once every 100 years, and it was supposed to be the last hope for peace. On the edge of neutral space, a massive space station floated like a small moon. It was called Unity, a place where war was left at the door, at least in theory. Inside the station, the air was heavy with tension. Representatives from 12 different alien empires sat around a glowing round table. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others had blue skin and 6 eyes, and one delegate looked more like a walking tree than a person. At the far end of the room sat the human ambassador, Sarah Rydell. She was calm, polite, and had sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a clean gray suit with a small Earth emblem on her chest. Unlike the others, she didn't raise her voice or slam her fists. She listened, quietly taking notes. The meeting had already gone on for 6 days. Each empire wanted something different. The Draal demanded more territory. The Nokari wanted weapons, limits. The Velari refused to speak unless others accepted their religion as law. There was no trust, only fear and old wounds. Sarah finally stood. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a laser. "We came here for peace," she said. "Not for more demands, not for threats. If we cannot find common ground, war will return, worse than before." The alien leaders murmured among themselves. The Zalroth warlord, a tall and armored creature with glowing red eyes, slammed, his hand on the table. "Peace is a lie, power is the only truth," he growled. "Your kind is new here, human. You speak of peace as if you understand the cost." Sarah didn't flinch. "We understand more than you think. Humanity knows war. We've fought each other for centuries, but we've also learned when to stop." Another delegate, High Priest, Vulan of the Velari, hissed through his teeth. "Then perhaps your species has grown weak." That was the final straw. The arguments grew louder. Accusations flew across the table. One delegate stormed out. Another activated a private communicator, likely sending instructions back home. The talks were collapsing. Sarah sat down slowly, her face unreadable. She tapped her tablet 3 times under the table. No one noticed. She turned to her assistant, a young officer named Jared Lee. "It's time," she said softly. "Prepare. Protocol Omega." Jared's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "Understood." Outside the meeting hall, in a secure human room deep within the station, a silent countdown began on a black screen. 72 hours. That's how long humanity would wait before responding. Back in the hall, the last attempt at peace finally crumbled. The alien leaders stood, some shouting, some silent, all angry. Each one knew what was coming next. War. Sarah stood too. "Then we will return to Earth," she said. "Good luck to you all. You'll need it." The aliens barely acknowledged her as she walked out of the hall. Her face remained calm, but inside her mind was racing. This was what she feared. The galaxy was not ready to change. But Earth was. And if war was coming again, it would not be like before. Meanwhile, in orbit above the planet, hidden among the trade ships and diplomatic cruisers, a quiet human battleship waited. It was black, shaped like a spear, and had no visible weapons. But inside, it was the most advanced ship humanity had ever built. Captain Derek Nash stood at the command console. He had been listening to the peace talks through a secure feed. When the signal ended, he turned to his crew. "Peace has failed," he said. "Begin silent operation. Power up the Omega systems, but keep them hidden. We act only if Earth is attacked first." The crew nodded. No panic, no rush. They had trained for this. Deep within the ship, machines came to life. A special kind of computer, one that didn't attack directly but learned, was waking up. It could read alien code, listen to enemy systems, and turn their own weapons against them. It was humanity's greatest secret. Protocol Omega. Back on the station, Sarah watched the stars from her temporary room. Jared stood beside her, nervous. "Do you think they'll attack first?" he asked. "They always do," she replied quietly. "We offer peace, they see weakness, but this time they'll learn." Jared looked unsure. "But what if they unite against us?" Sarah turned to him. Her voice was low but full of steel. Then they'll face something new. They think humans are soft. They think we don't belong here. But they haven't seen what we've built in the shadows. She paused. The galaxy forgot something important. We didn't survive our history by being kind. We survived by being clever, by being relentless. They may have more ships, more soldiers, but we think differently. That's what terrifies them, and it should. The stars outside the observation window of the human battleship twinkled softly, indifferent to the growing storm of war in the galaxy. Inside the ship, a cold silence hung in the air. The crew moved quickly, preparing for what they knew was coming. There was no celebration, no cheers of victory. They had simply done what was necessary. Captain Derek Nash paced back and forth in the command center. His face was tense, his jaw clenched. He wasn't new to battle. He had fought in humanities, wars both on Earth and in space. But this was different. The stakes were higher. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of, and he wasn't sure if the galaxy was ready for that. "Captain," said Jared Lee, his voice breaking through the silence. He stood by the communications console, staring at the information streaming in. "The alien fleets are beginning to move. The Zalroth, the Draal, and the Valari. They're preparing for something big." Derek nodded but didn't look up. He was focused on the screen in front of him, watching the system that would give them their edge. Protocol Omega. "It's time," Derek said quietly. "Activate it." In the hidden room deep within the human battleship, there was a room that few had access to. It was dark, filled with humming machinery and rows of complex devices. At the center of the room sat a large black console. It looked ordinary, but it was anything but. Dr. Lila Viren, a brilliant scientist and one of the architects of Protocol Omega, stood in front of the console. Her fingers flew across the keys, typing commands at a speed that almost seemed unnatural. The air around her buzzed with the low hum of the ship's advanced AI systems coming to life. "You ready, Doctor?" asked Jared, who had entered the room, his face a mix of curiosity and unease. Dr. Viren looked up from the console, her expression unreadable. "It's ready. But remember, this is just the first step. We're opening the door, but we don't know what will walk through it." Jared didn't respond. He simply nodded, feeling the weight of her words. For months, humanity had been quietly preparing. They had created a system that could hack into and control alien technology. The Omega system, a neural interface designed to be compatible with any alien tech, could analyze enemy weapons, ships, and even their communication systems. Once activated, it would allow the humans to take control of alien machines and turn their power against them. The galaxy had no idea. The countdown begins back on Earth. As the preparations for war unfolded, Sarah Rydell sat in a quiet room at the human embassy. The peace talks were officially over. The message had been sent. Humanity would defend itself. She stared out the window at the bustling city below, her mind still processing the events of the past few days. She knew what was coming, and she wasn't afraid. She had faith in her people. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. Her comm device beeped, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up and saw the message. "The Omega system is online. We are ready." Sarah exhaled slowly. This was it. She glanced at the clock. 48 hours. That's how long humanity had until the alien fleets would arrive. It wasn't just about protecting Earth. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be taken lightly. The first trial run back aboard the battleship, Derek stood before the main control panel. Dr. Viren's team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now it was time for the first real test of Protocol Omega. "Activate the simulation," Derek ordered. His voice was steady, but a flicker of tension still ran through him. This wasn't a test anymore. This was real. Dr. Viren's fingers moved across the console, and the screen in front of Derek came to life. It was a map of the galaxy, with hundreds of blinking dots representing ships, stations, and colonies. Slowly, those dots shifted to form a new pattern. The human fleet was already in position. First target, Dr. Varane said. The Zalroth warship fleet. We'll begin with their weapon systems. Derek nodded. The Zalroth were known for their powerful ships and advanced weaponry. If humanity could neutralize their weapons, the rest would follow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screens flickered. The simulation showed the Zalroth fleet moving through space. As they did, their weapons went dark. The massive laser cannons, the missile pods, they were completely useless. What just happened? Jared asked, leaning over Derek's shoulder. The Omega system hacked their ships, Dr. Varane explained calmly. Their weapons are offline. The fleet is powerless. Derek's eyes widened. It worked. Not just that, Varane replied. We've gained full control of their ships. They're ours now. Derek's heart raced. This was only a simulation, but the implications were clear. Humanity had the power to control the most advanced alien technology in the galaxy. Let's run the full test, Derek said, his voice firm. Take their entire fleet. The screens flickered again. This time, entire Zalroth ships turned as if they had received new orders. They moved as one, now under human control. The fleet was no longer an enemy. It was an extension of humanity's power. The room fell silent as the crew absorbed what they had just seen. It was more than just a victory. It was a declaration. The shift in power back on the station, the alien leaders continued to argue. But outside the station, the situation was changing quickly. A message was sent to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had taken control of an entire enemy fleet without firing a single shot. The alien empires who had laughed at humanity's attempts at diplomacy now found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Earth was no longer just another insignificant player in the galaxy. It was a force to be reckoned with. The response from the other alien empires was swift. Messages were sent to all the high-ranking officials. Some were filled with anger, some with disbelief. They couldn't fathom how humanity had achieved such power. But one thing was clear. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong could simply rule over the weak. Humanity had proven that it could take down anyone, even the most powerful fleets. The quiet of the human battleship was slowly replaced by a growing tension. The crew could feel it in the air, the awareness that something big was coming. They had shown their hand, and now the galaxy was reacting. The silence that had once been a peaceful hum was now filled with a steady anticipation. Time was running out. In the war room, Captain Derek Nash stood before a massive holographic display. His eyes scanned the map of the galaxy, watching as thousands of dots blinked and shifted in real time. Every dot represented an alien fleet or military base, and every single one of them was now aware of humanity's power. Derek could almost hear the ripple of fear spreading across the galaxy. How long before we see movement from the enemy? He asked, his voice steady but his gaze hard. Dr. Lila Viren, who had worked tirelessly on Protocol Omega, looked up from her console. She adjusted her glasses and quickly ran through the data. Their fleets are in motion, she said. The Zalroth, Drull, and Valari have all begun preparations. They're calling for reinforcements. Derek's eyes narrowed. They won't back down that easily, not after what we did. No, Dr. Varane agreed, tapping a few more commands. They'll come for Earth, all of them, but they won't be ready for what's coming next. Derek nodded. Make sure the Omega system is ready to go. If they fire on Earth, we strike back immediately. A galaxy on edge across the galaxy, the alien empires were scrambling. The peaceful negotiations had turned into something far more dangerous. The news that humanity had successfully hacked an entire fleet of Zalroth warships was now public, and it was all anyone could talk about. The entire galaxy was in shock. Warlord Zalroth, leader of the most powerful military faction in the galaxy, paced angrily aboard his flagship, the Inferno. His eyes glowed bright red as he stared at the image of Earth, a small blue planet he now saw as his greatest threat. They've shown their power, Zalroth growled. But they don't understand. This galaxy was not made for them. It was made for those with strength. They think they can control our weapons, our fleets. Let's see how they handle real fire. He turned to his command officers, a brutal look in his eyes. "Prepare for full assault. We strike Earth at dawn." In a nearby room, High Commander Narek, the leader of the Drawl, stood in front of his advisors, a deep sense of worry in his eyes. The Drawl were known for their wisdom and their cautious approach to war, but even they couldn't ignore the threat humanity now posed. "They have technology we cannot understand," Narek said, his voice low. "We must act fast before they gain more control. Their rise will disrupt the entire balance of power. We cannot allow it." One of his advisors, Commander Zalri, stepped forward. "We must unite. It is the only way. We cannot let Earth remain standing." Narek nodded grimly. "Then we will unite. For now. But remember, if humanity shows us any weakness, we will crush them." Earth's final defense on Earth, the situation was far more serious. The war room was buzzing with activity as Ambassador Sarah Rydell and her team watched the incoming fleet data on their screens. She was no longer just a diplomat. She was humanity's last line of defense, and she knew the stakes were higher than ever before. "They're coming for us," Sarah said quietly, her fingers brushing over the data. "They won't stop until we're destroyed, but we won't give them the satisfaction." Jared Lee, standing by her side, nodded. "We have to act before they get too close. Earth's defenses aren't enough to stop them. We need more." Sarah glanced up. "The Omega system will give us that edge, but we're running out of time. Once they launch their attack, it'll be too late." "We'll have to strike first," Jared said, the urgency in his voice clear. "We can't let them reach Earth." Sarah met his gaze and nodded. "We'll give them a reason to fear us." A move across the stars. The alien fleets gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system, massive ships that stretched across the dark expanse of space. The combined forces of the Zalroth, the Drawl, and the Valari were preparing to launch their final assault. Each fleet was massive, many ships the size of small moons, each heavily armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy entire cities with a single shot. But they were not prepared for humanity's response. Back on the human battleship, Derek and his crew watched in silence as the alien fleets closed in. A sense of resolve had settled over them. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they had something the galaxy hadn't seen before: humanity's ability to adapt, to innovate, and to think the unthinkable. "Launch the first wave," Derek ordered, his voice calm, though there was no mistaking the gravity of the moment. Dr. Vereen activated the Omega system. A wave of energy spread out from the battleship, invisible but powerful. The system reached out to the closest enemy ships, first the Zalroth. Slowly, their weapon systems began to power down. A few moments later, the entire fleet was immobilized. "What happened?" Jared asked, looking at the screens in disbelief. "We've gained control of their ships," Dr. Viren said, her voice cold and calculated. "We have them. All of them." Derek turned to Sarah. "It's working. We've got them on the run." The enemy responds back aboard the Inferno. Warlord Zalroth's rage was uncontrollable. His fleet, the pride of his empire, was completely disabled. His commanders were scrambling, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. "Impossible," he roared. "Their technology. How can they control us like this?" Zalroth slammed, his fist on the table. "Ready the fleet for a counterattack. We may have lost a battle, but we will not lose the war." The Zalroth were not giving up. They would come again, with even more power, more resources. But what they didn't know was that humanity wasn't going to stop until they were the ones in control of the galaxy's future. The tension in the control room was nearly unbearable. The human battleship, the Vanguard, had taken its position just beyond the orbit of Earth. The alien fleets were still in motion, their massive ships a threat on the horizon. Yet there was no panic aboard the human vessel. The crew stood ready, calm in the face of what was to come. Captain Derek Nash stood at the helm, eyes locked on the incoming alien fleets. The holographic map of space blinked with countless markers as the Zalroth, Drawl, and Valari ships moved closer. There was no turning back now. The moment humanity had prepared for had arrived. "They're almost within range," Lieutenant Maria Cruz said, her voice steady as she watched the data flow in front of her. "We've disabled their weapon systems, but we can't hold them. Forever." Derek's eyes narrowed. "We won't have to hold them long. Once we launch the first strike, we'll send a clear message." Dr. Lila Varen walked in, her face focused but calm. "The Omega system is fully operational," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "We have control of the Zalroth fleet and the Draal are next, but we need to act quickly before they realize what's happening." Derek nodded, turning to the crew. "Prepare for the first wave. Initiate Protocol Omega." Across the galaxy, the enemy regroups in the heart of the Zalroth flagship. Warlord Zalroth paced back and forth, his massive armored form casting shadows across the walls. His mind raced. The enemy had taken control of his ships, but he wasn't about to show fear. He had led his people through battles far worse than this. "How could this happen?" Zalroth growled. "No one has ever been able to control our fleets. Their technology is too primitive." One of his commanders stepped forward, his voice laced with concern. "We've tried to regain control, but their systems are locked. Our weapons, our engines, they're all useless." Zalroth's eyes flared with anger. "Then we fight back with what we have left. We are warriors. We do not rely on machines. We will take Earth by force." The warlord slammed his fist into the command console, causing sparks to fly. "Prepare for the final assault. We will not stop until Earth is ours." The attack begins, back on the human battleship. The countdown had begun. The crew was in place, every officer working in sync with one goal: to stop the alien invasion before it even reached Earth. "First strike ready," Lieutenant Cruz said. "We've locked onto the Zalroth fleet, targeting their lead ship." Derek took a deep breath. This was it, the moment humanity would prove its strength to the galaxy. "Fire," he commanded. In a flash, the human battleship unleashed its first wave of missiles, sleek, fast, and deadly. They cut through space like a swarm of metal wasps, headed straight for the Zalroth fleet. There was no warning, no time for the enemy to react. The first explosion rocked the Zalroth warship. Then another. The shockwave spread, taking out the lead ship's defenses. The rest of the fleet scrambled to respond, but they were already outmatched. "Direct hit on their lead ship," Cruz reported, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We've completely neutralized their front lines." Derek's face remained stern. "Now we show them what humanity can do." The Omega system. Strikes with the Omega system fully online, humanity's power was no longer just a defense. It was an unstoppable force. Dr. Varen watched the data pour in, her fingers dancing across the console. "We have full control of the Draal fleet now," she said, her tone satisfied. "All weapon systems are offline, but their ships are still moving. Let's see what happens when we take control." A moment later, the Draal ships began to change course. Slowly they turned toward the remaining Zalroth fleet, now under human control. The Zalroth didn't know it yet, but they were about to face an attack from their own allies. Derek's eyes narrowed in focus. "Let's move them into position. Once we have their fleets aligned, we'll launch another strike." The enemy, divided and disoriented, was now in the hands of humanity. The first response back on the Valari homeworld. High Priest Vulan watched the events unfold with a mix of awe and fear. The humans had outplayed them, and now the galaxy's most powerful fleets were at their mercy. "We cannot allow this," Vulan muttered to himself, pacing in the chamber. "If they control the Zalroth and Draal, they will become the rulers of the galaxy." His advisors, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "What do you propose, High Priest? Their Omega system is too powerful. We cannot hope to defeat them with conventional forces." Vulan's eyes glowed with a dangerous light. "We will not fight them directly. Instead, we will turn the galaxy against them. We will send a message to every race, every species. If humanity is allowed to grow, they will dominate us all. We must unite against them before it's too late." The turning point back aboard the Vanguard, the crew watched in silence as the alien fleets continued to flounder. With each passing moment, the Zalroth and Draal grew more disorganized. The Omega system was an unmatched weapon, and humanity was using it with precision. Derek stood at the center of the command room, his eyes fixed on the unfolding chaos. "We've crippled them," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of satisfaction. "Now we take the final step." "Captain," Crew said, turning to him, "the Valari have already begun rallying their forces. They're calling for all ships to converge on Earth." Derek's expression hardened. "Then it's time we prepare for the real battle. They can come, but they'll come to a new kind of war, a war they're not prepared for." He turned to Dr. Viren. "What's the status of the Omega system?" "We've integrated all 3 fleets," she replied. "We can control the Zalroth, Draal, and Valari ships. Their fleets are already aligned. The final strike is ready." "Then let's end this," Derek said, his voice firm. The human advantage across the galaxy, the alien leaders scrambled to form alliances, trying to figure out how to stop the humans, but there was no simple solution. Humanity had done what no one had thought possible. They had gained control over the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, and now they were using them with deadly precision. The Zalroth and Draal, once proud and feared, were now pawns in humanity's game. The Valari, despite their religious beliefs and ancient wisdom, were beginning to realize they had underestimated the humans. The battle for the galaxy had just begun, and humanity had already proven they were the new power to be reckoned with. The countdown to victory was on, and for the first time, the aliens could hear it. The humans had shown their power, and there was no going back. The cold vastness of space stretched out endlessly, but it was no longer silent. The tension had shifted. Every move, every fleet, every system was now a calculated risk. The human forces, once just a tiny flicker in the galaxy, were now the central focus of the galaxy's most powerful empires. On Earth, Captain Derek Nash stood before the holographic map that dominated the war room. The fleet was ready, but the stakes were higher than ever. "Every alien empire is moving toward Earth," Lieutenant Maria Cruz said. "The Zalroth are regrouping, the Draal are reorganizing, and the Valari are assembling a massive fleet." Derek's eyes narrowed as he glanced over the display. "They'll try to strike before we gain full control of their fleets. We can't let them get any closer. Prepare the Omega system. We take the fight to them." Dr. Lila Viren, standing nearby, added, "It's not just about the Omega system anymore. We've taken control of their fleets, but the Valari are rallying. If we don't act now, we could lose the advantage." Derek nodded, turning to face his crew. "We move on their strongest point first. The Valari are the most powerful and the most dangerous right now. We show them that they've underestimated humanity. The enemy's dilemma." Light years away, aboard the Valari flagship, High Priest Vulan was fuming. His people had tried to rally the entire galaxy, calling for a united front against the humans, but their efforts were beginning to falter. "How could they have gained control of our fleets?" Vulan demanded, his voice echoing in the command chamber. "Our technology is far superior. We have the knowledge of the ancients. The humans are nothing compared to us." His advisor, Commander Koran, tried to calm him. "It seems their technology is much more advanced than we thought. We've lost contact with a large portion of our fleet. The Zalroth and Draal are too disorganized to help. We may have to reconsider our strategy." Vulan's face twisted in fury. "Reconsider? We cannot afford to retreat. We must strike back. If we don't destroy them now, we will lose everything. They cannot be allowed to control the galaxy." Humanity's response back on Earth, the human fleet was preparing for the most dangerous phase of the conflict. Derek stood at the front of the war room once again, his hands clasped behind his back. "We can't wait any longer," he said. "The Valari are closing in. They're organizing their forces, and they'll be here within a matter of hours. Our best chance is to hit them hard before they have time to regroup." Dr. Viren nodded, tapping the console. "We have the Valari fleet in range. The Omega system is ready. We'll take their ships without them even knowing what hit them." Derek turned toward his crew. "Once we disable their fleet, we will show them that we are not a race to be ignored. This is the beginning of humanity's rise." The final strike was about to begin. The first clash. The human fleet moved quickly, using their control of the Omega system to disable the most dangerous elements of the Valari's ships. They could no longer rely on the overwhelming strength of their weapons. The human fleet, though smaller, was more efficient, more deadly. As the battle unfolded, the Valari were left scrambling to adjust to a reality they weren't prepared for. The Omega system had given humanity an edge that no one had seen coming. The once proud Valari were now just another defeated empire on the horizon. Lieutenant Maria Cruz looked up from her console. The Valari fleet is losing power. Their ships are being immobilized one by one. Captain Nash gave a small nod. Good. Keep pushing forward. We don't stop until they surrender. A shocking twist just as the Valari were on the verge of complete defeat. A new threat emerged. From the far edge of the system, a massive fleet of Zalroth warships appeared, breaking through the darkness of space. They had arrived at the last moment and they were furious. This is it, Derek muttered under his breath. We've got them right where we want them. But the sudden appearance of the Zalroth fleet was a dangerous wild card. Their ships were massive, their weapons powerful. Humanity's control over their ships had given them an advantage. But the sheer firepower of the Zalroth was a different story. Derek knew they couldn't rely solely on the Omega system anymore. We need to move fast, he said, his voice sharper. They'll use every weapon in their arsenal to try and break us. Everyone prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to outsmart them. The human fleet was ready, but the Zalroth had one advantage: their experience in battle. They were not easily defeated. The two fleets collided in a spectacular clash of light and metal. The battle for survival. The Vanguard dodged fire from the Zalroth, twisting and turning with grace. Derek's fingers flew across the controls as he ordered his ship to weave through the oncoming blasts. The massive warships of the Zalroth were relentless, their weapons tearing through space with terrifying force. Captain, we're taking hits, Cruz called out. Shields are holding, but we can't keep this up much longer. Derek's eyes narrowed. We're not giving up. Launch the drones. Let's take out their engines. At his command, a fleet of small, nimble drones launched from the Vanguard, each equipped with high-powered explosives. They zipped through the chaos of the battlefield, targeting the Zalroth warship's engines. Explosions erupted as the drones found their marks, disabling key ships one by one. Their engines are failing, Cruz shouted in disbelief. We're gaining ground. The tipping point as the Zalroth fleet began to falter. The Draal joined the fray. Their ships were sleek, fast, and deadly. With the Valari's fleet nearly wiped out, the Draal became the last hope for the alien coalition. But they were already too late. The human fleet had turned the tide of battle in their favor, and the Zalroth and Valari were too disorganized to respond effectively. Dr. Varan, watching the situation unfold, leaned forward. We can take the Draal fleet too, but we need to move fast before they recover. Derek's face was hard. We don't stop until they're all neutralized. Let's finish this. The final push began. The battle had reached a breaking point. The vastness of space now echoed with the sounds of war. Shattering explosions, the hum of energy shields flickering in and out, and the crackling of weapons fire. The human fleet, though smaller, had proven to be far more organized and deadly than any of the alien forces had ever expected. Now they stood on the edge of victory. Captain Derek Nash stood in the command center of the Vanguard, watching the battlefield unfold on the massive screens. The Zalroth fleet had been reduced to rubble, and the Valari had been forced into retreat. The Draal were next, but they weren't going down without a fight. The remaining alien forces had no idea what was coming next. They're starting to fall back, Lieutenant Maria Cruz observed, her eyes tracking the movements of the Draal ships. But they're still dangerous. If we don't keep pressure on them, they'll regroup. Derek nodded. We won't let that happen. Prepare all weapon systems. We're going to hit them hard and fast. As he spoke, Dr. Leela Vereen entered the room, her expression tense but determined. The Omega system is still holding strong, but we can't rely on it forever. We've taken control of their fleets, but we've also drawn their attention. The Zalroth and Valari are regrouping, and the Draal are pushing back with everything they've got. Derek turned toward her. Then we make sure they understand that they're not getting Earth. We hit them before they can recover. The Last stand on the other side of the galaxy aboard the Draal flagship, General Okar stared at the holographic map of the battlefield. His forces were struggling, but they weren't ready to give up. The human fleet had dealt heavy blows to the Zalroth and Valari, but the Draal were still a powerful force in their own right. We cannot let them control the galaxy, Okar muttered to himself, his fists clenched. We have lost too much already. We must destroy them before they become unstoppable. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Tesh, looked at the general. We still have strength left. The humans are strong, but they are not invincible. If we can force them into a retreat, we can regroup and try again. Okar looked out the viewport, his expression cold. We won't have another chance. This is the last stand. We either destroy them here, or we lose everything. The final battle, the human fleet pressed forward, moving as a well-oiled machine. Every ship in the fleet was working in unison, firing coordinated blasts that shattered the Draal defenses. The Draal ships retaliated with their deadly plasma cannons, but the humans were faster, using the terrain of space to their advantage, dodging and striking with precision. The Vanguard led the charge, its sleek form cutting through space with lethal intent. Captain Nash stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls, directing his crew with a calm authority. Fire everything, he ordered. We end this now. Lieutenant Cruz nodded, her fingers flying across the console. All weapon systems engaged. We're locking onto their command ship. The massive energy beams fired from the Vanguard, ripping through the space between the ships, cutting into the Draal command ship's hull. The explosion that followed was deafening, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Draal fleet. Staggered! We've broken their formation, Cruz called out. Their command ship is destroyed and their forces are in disarray. But Okar was far from defeated. His ships began to regroup, forming a defensive perimeter around the remaining forces. Don't let them regroup, Derek ordered. We push forward. Now. The turning point, the battle raged on, but it was clear that the human fleet had gained the upper hand. The Omega system had crippled the Draal's ability to coordinate their ships, and now the humans were turning the tide in their favor. Dr. Viren monitored the system's progress, watching the data stream in. We've isolated the Draal fleet's communication networks. Their ships are falling apart without their central command structure. Derek didn't take his eyes off the screen. We finish them now. With a series of calculated moves, the human fleet moved in for the kill. The Draal ships, though still fighting fiercely, could no longer hold the line. The humans had outmaneuvered them at every turn, and the remaining Draal ships began to fall one by one. The Draal flagship, battered and burning, attempted a last-ditch escape, but it was too late. The Vanguard fired the final shot that sent the flagship into a fiery explosion, marking the end of the battle. The aftermath, with the Draal fleet defeated, only a few scattered remnants of the alien forces remained. The Valari had been beaten back, and the Zalroth had retreated to their homeworlds to lick their wounds. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated the galaxy's most powerful empires. Captain Nash stood silently as he watched the debris of the battlefield float in the cold void of space. The victory was complete, but the cost had been high. Thousands of lives had been lost, both human and alien. Still, humanity had proven its strength, and it had sent a message to the galaxy. Earth was no longer a place to be ignored. Is it over? Cruz asked, her voice quiet, her eyes still on the screens. For now, Derek replied, his voice filled with resolve. But this is just the beginning. The galaxy reacts. News of humanity's victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The alien empires that had once considered Earth a mere backwater planet were now forced to reconsider everything they knew. The Zalroth, Valari, and Draal, once the dominant powers of the galaxy, had been soundly defeated by a human force that they had thought to be insignificant. On the Valari homeworld, High Priest Vulan looked out over the cities as news of the defeat reached him. The Valari had been humiliated, their fleets scattered, their pride shattered. The galaxy would never be the same again. We were wrong, Vulan whispered. Humanity. They are a force that cannot be ignored. They have proven themselves more powerful than we could have imagined. The Volari were not the only ones rethinking their strategies. Across the galaxy, leaders from every corner of space were making new plans, new alliances, and new strategies. The old balance of power was gone. The human legacy back on Earth, the people were celebrating their victory. The war was over, for now, but the human spirit had been tested, and it had proven to be stronger than anyone had ever thought possible. President Emily Carter stood on the balcony of the White House, looking out at the crowds below. The war had ended, but the future was uncertain. Humanity had won the battle, but they had yet to win the peace. She turned to her advisors. "We've sent a message to the galaxy, but now we have to prepare for the future. We must ensure that humanity is not only a force to be reckoned with, but a force for peace." The galaxy had seen humanity's wrath. Now they would see if they could be trusted to lead.